Hello and welcome to Rewildology, the podcast that explores conservation, travel, and rewilding the planet. I'm your host, Brooke Mitchell-Norman, conservation biologist and adventure traveler. Our species has coexisted with carnivores for as long as we've walked on this planet. And as the globe's top predator, we've developed an interesting relationship with carnivores, a mix of fear, reverence, persecution, and admiration. As we allow carnivores to return to their native territories, we are relearning how to coexist with predators. Even though we've gained a tremendous amount of knowledge in the past century, our feelings towards deadly creatures haven't changed, and conservationists are stuck in the middle of human-carnivore conflict. So, how do we live with carnivores? Do they hold the secrets in their biology that can inform us on how to avoid conflict? And are there any global truths to living with predators? To take us on a global carnivore tour, today we are sitting down with Miha Krofel, PhD, head of the Wildlife Ecology and Management Research Group at the University of Ljubljana, and a member of the IUCN's Cat Specialist Group, Canid Specialist Group, and Large Carnivore Initiative for Europe. Miha was first drawn to paleontology as a young child and loved learning about the past extinct carnivores. However, when it came time to decide what to do with his life, he made the conclusion that sitting in a museum looking at dead things wasn't nearly as fun as studying a live species in the wild. So, in university, Miha made the switch to wildlife biology and became an expert on Eurasian lynx ecology and behavior. He also carried a dream of traveling the world, and through luck and perseverance, Miha has worked in several countries on various continents studying the area's carnivores. Miha is truly a global carnivore expert and has published a ton of papers on predator ecology, behavior, and conservation. Through this episode, we are adding 3 more countries to the show's country list. Miha and I discuss Eurasian lynx, brown bears, and golden jackals in Slovenia. We then hop across the globe to chat about lions, cheetahs, and leopards in Namibia. Following, we take another oceanic leap and learn about snow leopards and Pallas cats in Mongolia. We wrap up the conversation with a nice pretty bow and talk about carnivore coexistence on a higher scale and explore the ups and downs of Miha's career. If you enjoy a hardcore science conversation that you can't walk away from, then you won't want to miss a moment of this episode. Really quickly before we dive in, I have a tiny favor to ask of you, dear listener. We are currently putting together a massive grant proposal to send to a well-known organization, one that I know you know very well, to hopefully fund an exciting podcast series in the field. To help the show look as awesome as possible to the grant committee, could you maybe please take a moment and leave an up to 5-star rating on your favorite podcast app? You don't have to leave a review, but if you feel up to it, I'm sure the committee would love to read why you enjoy the show. So thank you all so much. All right, everyone, please enjoy this conversation with Miha. Well, hi, Miha. Thank you so much for coming on the Rewildology podcast and sitting down with me and the entire community and taking us quite around the world today to talk about a very special group of animals, our large carnivores. Before we get to all of that, though, in this global tour that we're going to go on, what is your journey? How did you get to what you're doing today?
Yeah, hi everyone, and thanks for inviting me. I guess my journey started a bit in the past. I was really into paleontology when I was a kid, like in high school. And it was the first time I think I got really interested in cats, especially like European cave lions and these big fellas from the past. But then, later I got a bit more, I was thinking about what I want to do when I grow up and actually get a job. And I said, maybe, just sitting in a museum looking at rocks is not the most exciting thing one can do for a living.
Right.
So then this is when I kind of switched then more into wildlife biology, so to actually be out there and do stuff in the field with living animals instead of dead ones.
Right.
Yeah, and then during my college years, I got involved in lynx research, wildcat research, and I guess this is how it started. And then later on, just opportunities were coming by, so I kind of expanded and started working elsewhere. But it all started back in my home country in Slovenia, where we're lucky enough to still have population of, we call it European big cat, although it's not really a big cat, it's Eurasian lynx. And this is how I started my career, just mainly snow tracking this animal.
And why exactly did you decide to take the carnivore route? I mean, there's plenty of wildlife in Europe and across the world that you could have focused on. Was there something that drew you specifically to this group of animals?
Definitely, but I'm not sure if I can actually identify what it was. I was just always attracted to predators. Maybe just, aesthetically, I guess. And also they're like one of the most difficult, most elusive animals in many ecosystems to find. So there's kind of this mystic around them. And I'm sure I was also influenced by watching the wildlife documentaries, and then predators also have a big role there. So I guess it was also part of that.
Right. No, I totally agree. I definitely have a very big infatuation with large carnivores, and the same thing. It was, the Discovery Channel when I was young, just watching, lions in the Serengeti. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what can I do to save them? I'm completely in love with them. So then focusing more on your PhD, which I think reading more online of your work seemed to set the foundation for the rest of what you end up doing. So I don't want to spoil it. What did you study when you were going through your PhD, and what were the big findings that came from that?
Yeah, for my PhD, I basically continued the same topic I had from my master thesis. That was focused on ecology of the Eurasian lynx. So for my master thesis, I was looking primarily into predation, especially because Eurasian lynx is very different from the bunny killers we have in North America, because our lynx is more like ecologically similar to, let's say, a mountain lion or leopard. So it's mainly hunting the ungulates, so prey bigger than itself, in contrast to the other lynx species like Canada lynx and bobcats and bear lynx, who usually go for smaller animals. So it started mainly with this relationship between the lynx and the roe deer, which is the main prey species here in Europe. And then for PhD, I kind of extended that to interaction with other animals. So not just prey species, but also the competitors. And actually, the most interesting finding that in the end came out was the interactions between the lynx and the brown bear. So our version of grizzly bear. And because it turned out that actually there's very effective scavengers, the bears. So they are able to find a lot of prey remains of the lynx. Because when, lynx is not a huge animal, it's around 20-25 kilos. So when it kills the roe deer, it's about the same size. And because of this, it usually takes 4 days for the lynx to consume the whole deer. And in these 4 days, it often happens that bear would come by and steal the carcass from the lynx. So this was the interaction actually we were looking in.
Wow. And when you say that, just studying North American species so much, I definitely hear a lot of similarities with like mountain lions' role in the Rocky. Well, they're everywhere. They used to be everywhere, and like the Rocky Mountain ecosystem. And how a lot of their prey, they store caches and then they're stolen. And bears are definitely a big, kleptoparasite for that. So, wow. Are you still doing work between brown bears and Eurasian lynx, or how's that going?
Yeah, we were. So for my PhD, we were just looking like in the basics, like what proportion are taken. We saw that actually it's surprisingly high. I mean, it's not surprising in a way, because we do have the highest density of brown bear in Europe and one of the highest in the world. So it's kind of not surprising, but still we're a bit amazed when we saw that actually 1 out of 3 kills from the lynx are taken by the bear.
Wow, 1 out of 3.
Yeah, it was. And then it was not, this is just the average. In some seasons, especially when bears are most active, like when they come out of the den in spring and the beginning of summer when they're mating, they are losing even more, like could be even 50% or more of the carcasses. So that was the first part. And then we continued with this a bit, because we're interested what is then the role of people, how they influence this interaction, mainly because, similar like in North America, the bears are one of the most managed species, they are. Because there's under strong pressure of culling, there's a lot of hunting of bears. At the same time, there's a lot of at least in Europe, we have a lot of artificial feeding. It kind of similar like black bears in North America. We also hunters put these huge amounts of corn and other foods to attract them. So it's similar here. So you have this intensively managed species, the bear, and then Lynx is taking a lot of consequences of this intensive management, because typically, bear managers, what they see is the bear. They rarely see much beyond that.
Right.
So nobody's thinking about how the bear then interacts with the wolf or the lynx or the other species when they're putting out all these huge amounts of corn and they're hunting, translocating bears and so on. So we were kind of interested how this human influence is then, what impact it has on the interaction between the bear and the lynx, and we actually show it's very strong. It's quite an important predictor of what will happen to the lynx is how the bear is managed in certain area, or how it used to be managed historically. So, for example, one thing that we really noticed is that if you're close to the artificial feeding site for a bear, not surprisingly, the chances that lynx will lose its kill are much higher than if it's further away. And because we have just very high density of these feeding sites, again, it's something similar, I guess, than with black bears in US. We have one feeding site every 3 square kilometers.
3 square kilometers?
Yeah, it's like
wow.
Thousands of them basically, and huge amount. Like they're about, I think the estimate was 40 tons of corn per average bear home range is put into the forest. So it's a huge amount of this anthropogenic food, and we see that also in our bears. They are like 1/3 of all the diet comes from this human source. So what we're looking now we still continue actually with this research as a PhD student who is looking now into did lynx figure this out? So did they understand that making a kill close to the feeding site for a bear actually increase the chances of kleptoparasitism? And analysis is still in progress, but what I can tell you, it seems that the experienced lynx, so lynx have been staying at least 1 year in a certain territory after they were, born or dispersed or translocated, whatever. So these experienced lynx, they seem to be avoiding actually these feeding sites, while the non-experienced lynx, so the ones that recently came to a certain area, they don't know where these feeding sites are yet. There we don't see so much avoidance. So yeah, we kind of keep. It's one of the storyline with research lines that we keep looking into it, because it's quite interesting and seems to be ecologically quite important here.
Wow, and just for context, what is the kill rate for Eurasian lynx? Like, how successful are they when they go on hunts?
Well, for the ungulates, which is the main food source, they usually kill a deer, let's say, once every 5 days. So, everything generally is very similar to mountain lion ecology, like the kill rates, what kind of prey they take, this interaction with bears. This is also why we have a lot of collaboration with, with colleagues from US and Canada, because they're just, it's a different species, but ecologically, behaviorally is really, really similar. And but that's also kind of a problem for the lynx, because on average, it needs 2 to 3 days to make a new kill after it abandons the previous one. The problem is that it doesn't have enough time to compensate for all the losses from the bears, right? Because, like I said, 1/3 of the kills are taken by the bears. And we saw that the lynx do respond. They kill more deer because of that, to kind of compensate for these losses. So in our study area, for example, they're killing about 25% more of the deer because of the bears. But they just don't have enough time to actually compensate all the losses. So only about 60% of these losses are compensated. And the other one is basically pure energetic loss for these animals.
Wow. And are you seeing a decrease in lynx population, or are they being seasoned enough to just start to avoid the bears? Or if the population of bears is that high? Yeah, this sounds like a lot of layers to this. I guess, how is the lynx faring and all of that?
Well, yeah, it's really hard to tease apart, what is affecting what. So generally, we can say that our lynx are in very bad shape, but this is not because of the bears. The main reason is the inbreeding, because our population was completely exterminated about 100 years ago, and then was reintroduced in the 1970s. but only 6 animals were released in what was thought to be just a first stage of the reintroduction program. But then second stage never followed. So actually, entire population we have now. It was very successful in the beginning. It spread to neighboring countries like Croatia, Bosnia, a little bit Italy and Austria, but it never got in contact with any other neighboring lynx populations, right? So all the lynx today are descendants of those 6 animals, among which we know there was mother and son, and probably also brother and sister. So all of them were related at the beginning. So we have just this incredibly high inbreeding rate. It's even higher than Florida panther. Probably know them. They're also very. So we were getting a lot of deformations. Like we had a lot of heart failures. Last year we lost one lynx when he went autopsy. It was like a huge hole in his heart, like between the left and right atrium. We had a lot of skeletal deformations. There was one interesting case. The lynx, they have these ear tufts on the ears, like Canada lynx. So we had this inbred animal who had 2 ear tufts on the same ear.
Oh my gosh!
It's really weird, yeah. So, and this is the main reason where there was kind of a quite drastic decline, let's say, in the last 20 years. But we already see quite a lot of improvement now, because since 2017, and there's a big LIFE project. LIFE is this financing program of the European Union. It's a huge project when we are reinforcing this population. So we are bringing ideas to include somewhere between 15 to 20 lynx from another population, from the Carpathians, and we are translocating them here to reduce the inbreeding level. I guess you also spoke with Vedran about this.
Yeah, I was actually going to bring that up. I was like, so you and Vedran work together, and if you wouldn't mind talking about that collaboration too, to hear both sides of the political divide on this, like literally, like you guys it'd be really cool.
Yeah, it's the same project, and actually we both started about the same year. There was a previous Lynx project called Dinaris, starting from 2006. And I think actually for both of us, this was our first professional job as a wildlife researchers.
Wow.
We are both hired as basically field technicians at the time. So we were main, field researchers here on Croatian side and me on Slovenian side. So we were in contact a lot, and he's a really nice guy. I really enjoyed working with him. We don't collaborate much in the field, unfortunately, in the last years, but we had some good time with the first project. And now we kind of work together both on each side of the border to have this lynx population, which is, our geneticists, they were forecasting that probably in 10 to 20 years it would go completely extinct.
Wow.
But now with these translocations, it seems that it's really helping them. Really see they bounce back, this new generation of lynx. So they're mating with the local ones, these translocated ones. Mm-hmm. So this first generation hybrids, they seem to be quite much more healthy. So far we didn't see any health issues among them, and also just population numbers are growing. So we have quite big hopes for the future now. It seems they will make it. So
good.
But still, coming back to this bear question, we're not sure actually if perhaps bears also contributed to this decline. We know for some other research, let's say from interaction between leopards and hyenas, that kleptoparasitism, so stealing of food, can actually influence the reproductive success of the predator. And especially since we are seeing this peak in losses to the bears in the summer period and late spring. This is the period when the lynx are giving birth, and then also females are lactating. So I think it's actually a good chance that the bear kleptoparasitism might be affecting the reproductive success. But at the moment we don't have enough data to actually test this assumption. But I think it's quite reasonable to expect it. And then big question, of course, in this context also, are these bear densities we have at the moment, are they, even higher than what would be a natural bear density here? Because we know that, brown bears and Eurasian lynx, they coexisted in Europe for, tens of thousands of years. I guess lynx is adapted to them to a certain extent. But I think there's actually a good chance that the bear numbers we have at the moment are even higher than what would be naturally in this landscape, primarily because of this very intensive artificial feeding. So then it's a question, how high density lynx can actually tolerate.
Wow, yeah, and that would make sense. And I guess to not completely steal the show away from the lynx and talk about bears, I mean, how do you figure that out if you're like a lynx conservationist and you're like, actually we have a massive bear problem, And then maybe bear conservationists are like, this is awesome. And then maybe bear hunters would be like, well, we would be happy to help with this situation. So I guess what's the management from this? Are you guys just waiting to see what the data says, or are things already in motion? Or what do you do with these high bear populations that might not be natural?
Yeah, it's quite complex and also very controversial, at
Right.
least in our country, because you have all these sorts of interests. Yeah, like I said, there's like hunters. They would prefer less bears because
Right.
they also got all sorts of problems. And then sometimes you have ecotourism workers who super high bear density is great for them because it's easier to show the bears to the tourists, and it's becoming a big business here to come and see bears. And they're usually seeing them at the artificial feeding sites because it's the easiest way how to see them. So it's also a bit controversial.
Yeah,
and
that's
of course
very controversial.
Then you have all these conflicts between local communities and bears. They come to villages, they store the garbage cans, they kill the sheep, they take down the fruit trees and so on. So yeah, it's quite a complex. Generally, I mean, there is a management plan or management goal is to actually reduce the bear population, at least in the core area in the Nereid Mountains. There's idea to increase it in the Alps because there's much less bears there. But in the core population, the idea is to reduce it. But it's been actually very hard to fulfill in the last years because before it was mainly depending on hunting. There was quite intensive culling. We have the highest culling rates of, I think, worldwide, even with the bears. About 20% of bears are shot. But in the last years, there was a lot of very active NGOs who were going to court and actually managing to stop the culls. So yeah, then for managers, it was even more difficult, to reach a certain population level because they were kind of limited in, they came up with a quota how many bears should be shot, and they could fulfill only 40% of it, and then the court stops it, and the next year they put a new quota, and court stops it again. Now last year court allowed it, so yeah, it's even if will be a clear management decision, very good management goal, I think it will be very hard to reach just because of all these sort of interests that they're pushing in different directions.
Oh yeah, and sitting down with Natasha Babik, like she informed us on the show that for those of us that might be used to bear populations in other locations, like translocating bears is really difficult. It's not done just because she's like, a lot of them just come back. We don't have the same amount of land as the US and Africa and all these other places that maybe translocations work a little better on. So, because maybe, the first thought is like, oh, we'll just take the surplus bears and go put them on the Alps. But it doesn't seem to be that easy. Is that also what you're seeing on your side?
Yeah, I mean, there are even much stronger other controversies about these translocations. One is that simply it's not really effective because, bears are very good in coming back.
Yeah.
And then the other problem is if you have if it's a problem bear, like a bear that lost fear of people and they make a lot of problems, where do you put it? I mean, it's Europe. You don't have huge forests. Okay, let's say there's a general plan in the Alps. We'd like to have more bears, but nobody there wants a problem bear. So
right.
Nobody, and even generally, people, okay, they would maybe tolerate if the bear comes there naturally, but to do all these releases, I'm quite sure there will be quite strong opposition among the local communities, because still the bear was not present there for many years, and people kind of, forgot how to live with the bear. In contrast to the Nereid Mountains, where bears never got extinct. So it's a big problem. I mean, Slovenia is always saying, whoever wants in Europe our bears, we're happy to export several, even hundreds per year. But there's just not enough, a lot of capacity in Europe to really take bears, especially in areas that didn't have bears for decades. Because I think there is a very slow process, and you have to start with small number of animals so that people get used to them, and you cannot just dump 100 bears in Holland or whatever.
Right.
So, at the same time, we have this very intensive culling. So we are anyway shooting, 200 bears plus minus in our country. So generally it was the policy that, you rather shoot the problem bear and this bear goes into the quota, and you rather not shoot than one of the, let's say, well-behaving bears, right? So because for this reason, there was not much translocations here. If there was like a problem bear, they usually just shoot him and he would be part of the quota. when you have, people everywhere and a lot of people and just small pockets of forest left, then it's really hard to manage with species like a brown bear.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds crazy difficult. I mean, because your focus is the Eurasian lynx, and now you're like, now I'm dealing with bears. And then also, I was just poking around your ResearchGate, and I saw this headline or this paper you published, I think it was in October, about it said golden jackal as a new kleptoparasite for Eurasian lynx in Europe. So there's a new thing now for the lynx? Golden jackals, is that new or just new to science, or what's the story behind that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting story, actually. It's one of the most dramatic changes we are seeing in carnivore world in Europe in the last few decades is definitely a jackal. Golden jackal is it's basically a counterpart of a coyote have in North America.
Mm-hmm.
And similar like coyotes were spreading in some parts of North America. It's like, similar to expansion of golden jackal, but maybe let's say, times 10 or times 100 even, because historically, golden jackal was very limited in Europe. It was present for at least centuries, but probably millennia. It was basically limited to the fringes of Europe, especially the coastlines and islands of the Mediterranean Sea and the Black Sea, so Southeast Europe. Like I said, at least for centuries. And then suddenly, towards the end of the 19th century, it started expanding. And especially after Second World War, it's just like a boom. It's like it's crazy. Like it's exponentially increasing. For example, it was probably, I will guesstimate a bit, but maybe we had like few hundreds of jackal stops, and now suddenly we have over 100,000, maybe coming close to the 500,000. Yeah, it's just crazy how it's basically exploded. It's showing kind of its characteristics, what you expect from the invasive alien species that comes to a new place and just starts spreading like crazy. And we're seeing, and this is like a native carnivore here, nobody brought it here. So of course there was a big question, what triggered this massive response? So from basically really limited to these fringes of Europe for centuries, and then suddenly it's like all over the place. We have now jackals all the way to the tip of Norway. There are now 4 jackals in France. Germany, the whole Central Europe is full of them, Pannonian Basin, like they really spread a lot. And when we're looking into the potential changes that happen in Europe, that would allow jackal to spread, it all points in the same direction. And this seems to be the wolf, the gray wolf, or more precisely, lack of wolves. Because in the same period, actually, when jackals started spreading, this time that wolves became really heavily persecuted throughout Europe. And we actually exterminated most of the wolf populations here. They just survived, especially, let's say, after the Second World War. They were limited to just these most remote forested, mountains of Europe. But from everywhere, from the lowlands and large part of Europe was without wolves. And this is what it seems to enable jackal to really start spreading. So it's a similar story. Like we know with coyotes also, they're spreading to areas when the wolves were exterminated, like, especially the East Coast, also like Labrador, even places where probably there were no coyotes historically, but after wolves were exterminated, this kind of enabled them to spread there. And it seems similar process, just on a much bigger scale, is happening in Europe with the golden jackal. Yeah, of course. And one of the questions is, what are these jackals bringing? We don't call it alien species because, it's native and it's spreading on its own. It's not that people were moving it, but still it's a new species. A species that was not present in Europe, ever. So big question is then also what are these animals bringing? So how they will change the ecosystems, because they are, can be very effective scavengers. They are also, predator of many rodents, but they also go for young or even adult ungulates. So we don't really know what's coming with them. And one of the first cases actually that what we observed is that similar to the brown bear, they also start showing up at the lynx kills and kept parasite on the lynx kills. So, I don't expect it will ever be as intensive as with the brown bear, but still it's kind of an interesting phenomena to follow, how these new species showed up and is now interacting with species like lynx, relying on their food. Interestingly, actually, what we're seeing now is because lynx overlaps a lot in their distribution with the wolf, because they both survived in these more remote, mountainous forest areas. And because still wolf has a major impact on the jackal distribution, there's just a recent paper we're now submitting where we tested like different parameters that affects the presence of jackal in Europe. And actually the stable wolf pack is number one reason why there'll be like, affecting probability of jackal present. And because the wolves, they overlap with lynx, it seems that actually wolves as kind of a protection from the jackal for the lynx.
Wow.
So, I usually think about lynx and wolf as competitors,
Right.
and they don't see that they would, really be friends. But in this interaction, when you have this now third species now coming in, the jackal, they actually seems to be, enemy of your enemy is a friend.
Yeah.
So,
Common enemy.
because, between wolves and lynx, actually, we don't see that much negative interactions. They definitely compete for the same prey species, but we don't see much kleptoparasitism. We didn't find any case of like wolves killing lynx and stuff like that. Perhaps the wolves can in the end actually be a good guy for the lynx because they will prevent jackals coming over. Because the problem with jackal is, in a way, they can attain very high densities. So basically, in one territory of one wolf pack, you can easily have 50 or maybe even 100 jackal territories.
Whoa.
Because they have much smaller territories, and so they have much higher densities. So you can imagine, even let's say one wolf will take, I don't know, let's say 5 kills from lynx per year, because they have so much jackals. Even if one jackal would take, not even a single kill every year, there are so many jackals in the end, they will still take much more kills from the lynx than let's say the wolf. So it's potentially it could be a big factor. Although there is one big difference, let's say, especially we compare it with the brown bear, is that lynx very likely can defend the kill from the jackal.
Oh yeah.
At least it's with one jackal. We're not sure what happens when there's like a whole family of jackals, a whole pack. But at least against one, it's a cat, and you don't want to mess with a cat, especially if it's bigger than you.
Right.
While against bear, lynx doesn't have a chance. Just the size difference just too big, so there's no way that lynx would defend it against the bear. So that's another aspect that we'll have to see. We have to follow in the future to see how this interaction establishes itself.
Wow, I am so glad I looked that up, because after how many carnivore experts I've now sat down with across Europe, somehow golden jackals have not been brought up. I mean, he even sat down with, Valeria Salvatore, who's an amazing wolf researcher, and jackals weren't brought up in that conversation either. I mean, I didn't know to ask about it until I saw your paper, but wow, maybe 100,000 jackals? That's crazy. I had no clue.
Yeah, it's much more than wolves, and it's a topic that always been under radar researcher. I mean, it was definitely an understudied species until I would say maybe 10 years ago. But now in the last 10 years, especially since it's showing up in places like Germany and Poland, and Denmark, and Scandinavia, now it's picking up. Now we say sometimes we joke that number of jackal papers are increasing almost with the same rate as the jackal numbers in Europe. Which is so cool. I mean, we were definitely learning a lot because still so much to learn about this species. Yeah, it's a definitely interesting topic because just so dramatic what's happening. We didn't see any similar thing with other native species here.
Wow, well, definitely you'll have to come on in a future episode and give us an update on all of this stuff, because we still have some more areas that we need to travel to. This is, I was like, oh my gosh, I got to keep asking and going down this rabbit hole, but we still have some other areas we need to get to. So let's go ahead and continue traveling around the world. So you've done a lot of work in Namibia. I love Namibia. I dream about going back all the time. And I also have found when I was there that the country is unique in a lot of ways in how it manages land and wildlife. So how exactly did you get from your area in Europe and studying the Eurasian lynx and then traveling all the way south to Namibia? So what was that transition that brought you to Africa? And then what did you end up studying, and what species of cat, and I guess everything? What was the project?
Yeah, one word, I guess you can say I got lucky.
Yeah.
I mean, I always had this great wish of going to Africa, like especially in high school. I was reading this, magazines about African big cats and watching documentaries. And I really set myself as a goal that until the end of my graduation, I would go to Africa. That was like my, number one goal, let's say, at the time. And I started saving money already in high school for this, and then throughout the college. But towards the end, I only managed to get enough money for the flight ticket. But then I was looking out probably need the same amount of money to go to, just to go to some safari or something. So I already gave up and said, okay, when I get a proper job, I'll do it. But then luckily in my last year at university, I happened to be on summer school in Poland. I met this German guy, and we kind of, during this summer school, we became kind of friends there. And then I told him about this wish about going to Africa and stuff. And then he said, oh, but I'm just, starting PhD in Namibia on cheetahs. And actually, I'd be looking for a volunteer for like field assistant to help me. And yeah, we can cover the cost there as long as you show up there. If you have money to come to buy a flight ticket, we can then, cover the other cost. And that was like perfect for me. I just had money for that. Yeah, so I could go there. And that was like, for me, was like, experience of a lifetime, definitely.
Right.
As a student, I was dreaming, I went there for 3 months, just helping with the field work, capturing cheetahs, putting colors on them and then tracking them. It was just really like a dream coming true. And afterwards, we still good friends today. His name is Jörg Metzheimer. He works at the ISW in Germany. And yeah, and we keep collaborating. Afterwards, they offered me a job to be employed for them after this volunteering, but I just got this Lynx project starting here, so I couldn't go. But we kept the idea, and then in 2014, I went back and we started also a parallel leopard project, because for me it was always, it was really nice capturing these cheetahs, really amazing project with great insights. But from time to time, you catch a leopard as a bycatch in a trap for cheetah, and this is something that really fascinated me, and I always dreaming like to work with leopards. And because then in the 10 years ago, there was already the farmers, they start saying, we see that cheetahs are kind of declining, but at the same time, we have this increasing leopard population. And actually the main conflict with the farmers starting to be the leopards, not so much the cheetah anymore. So this when with Jörg, we kind of constructed this small project inside the cheetah project, which will be focused on the leopards and special interactions between the cheetahs and the leopards to see something happening there. So this is how we start with the leopards. Now 2014, and we keep working. We have another project now, which is finishing. And then last year, ICW also get another major funding to work on vultures and lions. So I also got opportunity to get involved with the lion work now, which was another kind of a dream for myself to eventually get. Always had in this mind that okay, I want to end up like in working with lions. It was like since high school, the most fascinating maybe animal for me. But I didn't want also to achieve it too fast, because I was kind of what's then left in life, after you work with lions. So, but let's say that's a good point now in career to reach that point. So last year we started with this big project of lions in Etosha, and now we are working with all these three species and also interactions among them.
Well, what are you discovering? Like I said, I've been there. I've been to Etosha. I've seen the lions. I've seen wild cheetahs across Namibia, and yeah, I guess. What is the research? Is there a particular conservation question that you're looking to answer, or what was going on with the leopards? Why were their populations increasing? And did you actually find that? What did your work show you, or is showing you currently, about what's going on with the big cats there?
Yeah, so for a long time, our main study area was actually not a national park. This is the only place where we work with lions, because lions basically got exterminated throughout much of Namibia, so basically outside of protection areas, because they're really not compatible with livestock production. So wherever there was livestock, the lions usually gone. And this is a very new project that we started working in a national park also with lions. But before, for the past 20 years, we are focusing on the farmland, so outside national park, because that's actually the area where we have the largest cheetah populations in the world at the moment. We actually have higher density of cheetahs in the farmlands than in the national park, probably because it's actually the lions and spotted hyenas who suppress a lot the cheetah. So it seems that for cheetahs, maybe actually even better that there are no lions, they're exterminated. Right. even though that also themselves get shot, by farmers occasionally. But still, it's just the fact that you have much more cheetahs in the farmlands at the moment. Also because farmlands are much more extensive than any national park. And maybe one of the most fascinating things that come out with the cheetah project, it's really a long-term project, it's now running for more than 20 years, is that in contrast to most other cat species, what was observed that their territorial system is really untypical. So usually, let's say with leopards and tigers, lynx, most of the cats usually have one territory finishing, and then immediately you get a start of the next one. So they kind of neighbors, neighboring males, they're touching in their home ranges, or even overlapping a bit. But this seems not to be the case with the cheetah. We're still not really sure why, but there's kind of between the territories of the males, you have kind of a no man's land. And surprisingly, it's always constant distance. It's like roughly 20 to 25 kilometers between these territories.
Oh, that's a good ways.
Yeah, and nobody really knows why this, 2025. And even in, let's say, in Serengeti, it seems to be, for the data available there, Jörg was looking into it, he actually sees that it seems to be the same distance. And so that was already very interesting to discover, this kind of atypical spatial social organization. But the next step was, we were thinking, okay, how can we use this to help mitigating the conflict? Because, conflict was quite a serious one. So on one side, you have, farmers who are losing a lot of livestock, so it can even, it can be risky for their livelihoods. And on the other hand, you have a lot of retaliatory killings because, some farmers will protect their livestock by shooting the cheetah. So what we looked in is, let's say, the farms are pretty large there. So it's typically like 50 or can be even 200 square kilometers. And if you know which part of your farm is, we call it cheetah hotspot or a communication hub, and which area is kind of a no man's land where you only have the females and occasional, non-territorial male, then we assumed, okay, probably the chances of livestock attacks is much higher in these hotspots when you have high cheetah activity compared to this no man's land. Well, we already established collaborations with many farmers where we had cheetahs on collar. So we can actually say, okay, look, this part of the farm is the hotspot. Why don't you move your herds with calves? Because with cheetahs, usually the calves, only the young cattle that gets attacked. Adult cattle is very rarely targeted by cheetah.
Makes sense. So it's a little big.
Yeah. So we say, look, just move the herds with the sucklers, with the small calves into that part of the farm when it's no man's land for cheetah. And let's see what happens. And we got several farmers who did that for a couple of years, and the damages they experienced by the cheetahs went down 86%.
86%?
Yeah.
What?
It was amazing. So it was like, the most effective thing that, people came up so far, how to reduce damages caused by cheetahs. In very simple way, just knowing, okay, this area is territory, this one is no man's land, and they would move, and it worked perfectly. So for me, that was, probably one of the most satisfying, research project I had the chance to be part of, because not just that we got this insight into ecology of this animal that was not really studied before, but also can actually have very, concrete conservation implication out of it.
That's incredible. I don't know if I've ever heard statistics like that. Numbers that high just by using and understanding and knowing what these cats do, reducing conflict by that much. That might be the biggest success story that I've ever heard. And then what about the leopards? What was going on with them?
Yeah, well, interesting thing. We start observing. Generally they are quite, typical phthalates when it comes to, this spatial organization. There were no big surprises like with cheetahs. But the big surprise that came out was when we started putting camera traps on their fresh kills. It was not done much before, but we were doing this for a long time on Lynx here, because we got, all these insights, let's say, with bear kleptoprazism and stuff. We relied a lot on camera traps. So actually it started as, let's look how it does work with these scavengers on the leopards. Let's put some cameras out there. We start doing that. And the very interesting thing that we started observing is that, you had leopard with the GPS collar. It's very easy to find the kill site. Same as with lynx or with mountain lion, because they just stop moving when they make a big kill.
Right.
And usually they're there like for 3-4 days, so you can see it's so obvious when you see the data. They stop moving. Okay, they must have got something. So we are going there. So let's say we have this collared leopard. We find the kill. We put the camera, and then we start seeing that these kills. There's a lot of other leopards showing up without collars. And surprisingly loud, but still the sample size is quite small. So 2 years ago, we now started with the project actually focused on this. Let's see how much of this prey sharing seems to be going on. We really focus now last 2 years on putting more cameras out. And we found out that 1 out of 3 kills of leopards are shared between several of them.
Shared?
I mean, just like share, not necessarily at the same time, but there's one leopard feeding, then another one comes, and then 2 hours later the first one comes back, and we are not sure how peaceful this sharing is, but we are not seeing actually any fights. And sometimes we see 2 leopards at the same time there. But what is most fascinating is just this super high number, because there are not many leopards, they're territorial. Right. So typically you have one female and one male and maybe some subadults in the area. And just by, leopards moving around, you would really not expect that they would find so many kills, randomly, just coincidentally, while walking around. So it seems there must be something going on there, some kind of they are much more social than what we're thinking so far.
My gosh!
For me, that was very fascinating, and it's very interesting because again, it's a parallel with the mountain lion research in North America. Because I think it was in Grand Tetons in Wyoming, they discovered exactly the same thing with the mountain lions. There is a lot of prey sharing among the mountain lions there, but also great proportion. And even more fascinating, they discovered that it seems to be reciprocal. So let's say Puma A will be sharing with Puma B, then also Puma B will be sharing with Puma A, but not with Puma C, because let's say Puma C doesn't want to share with others.
Oh, you scratch my back, I scratch yours.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it might be some actually good strategy in a way, because if you're just unlucky in hunting last few weeks, it's nice that you can share with someone who help you out when you don't get out so much, and then when you're lucky with hunting, you can again share with someone with another one. So but it is very new. It's just we are getting the first insights into this. So this was just the first study on leopards. It's not even published yet, and the mountain lion work also just came out a few years ago. But I mean, definitely there's much more there than what we imagined before, and this solitary species seems to be much more social. That even though they don't walk around so much together at the same time, it seems that still they are they're always in contact. They know about each other, and there was even like a fascinating research. I just read the paper the other day. Was just published from South America on jaguars. Mm-hmm. They observe that there are sometimes jaguar males. They make coalitions, and they even walk around like together. Yeah, like
really?
something that's it's known for cheetahs, for example. Cheetah males they make coalitions. Usually it's brothers, but not necessarily. And it seems actually that for jaguars it would be similar. And but nobody knew about this until last year, basically, when this paper got published. So it's these solitary animals are, I think, it's really interesting subject to study because there's much there that we just couldn't understand before. Also because of technological limitations, it's very hard to study them because you never see them, So
absolutely. And that is really fascinating. And again, another topic that as your research develops, we'll have to have you back on to do all the updates. But even when I was in Nepal, oh God, when was that? I guess I'm already losing track of time. It was March 2021. I'm losing track of time. I was with a lot of tiger researchers there, and they were also saying very similar things, that they're seeing social behaviors of tigers that no one really knew was a thing before then. I mean, granted, they have a really high population of tigers now. And so it seems that, just like you said, as technology advances in the research field, we're starting to understand that cats aren't as solitary as we've previously thought. And I didn't know that about jaguars. And gosh, maybe honestly, they're going to be way more social across the board than we ever thought. And yeah, that's really cool. I'm really interested to hear what your research says about leopards too.
Yeah, and it really seems not to be, because when this first paper on mountain lions came out, we thought, oh, this is like really super fascinating, but maybe it's a, peculiar thing about mountain lions, like, what we discovered, let's say, for cheetahs. But now it's leopards, probably also jaguars. And I believe it could be the same case with snow leopards. We only so far managed to put one camera trap out there on the fresh kill from a snow leopard. But on this one, we got two snow leopards fitting on it. So it's, I'm sure there are many other, cats that are sharing this. We're seeing also with lynx occasionally, but lynx seems to be much less than, let's say, with leopards. But,
are you also doing like genetic studies? Because I'm trying to think like if there's like a family component. I mean, that's a whole other level, like being able to collect scat or an actual like live sample. Yeah.
that was my guess also in the beginning, that it would be, like sharing with your family, because it's kind of
Yeah.
you improve your fitness. But at least the study on mountain lions showed it's not related with kinship. That it doesn't really explain it, if you'll be sharing with another one or not. So, but we don't know for any other species. It was never tested, let's say, for leopards or any other.
I love that there's still questions that we don't know.
Yeah,
When I feel like
it's much more exciting.
Yes, I mean, especially you, where you've dedicated your whole life to this, and I sit down with people like you that do this stuff, and I'm a big cat, enthusiast and advocate and stuff like that. So to know that we still have so much to learn, gosh. Like I said, this is just going to be part one of, I'm sure, many parts with Miha, because we haven't even finished yet. Now, let's hop across the globe again to Asia. And tell me, how exactly did you get to spend time or researching, or whatever you want to call it, with Sumatran tigers and clouded leopards in Borneo? I mean, those are two very specific and special species. And I've actually not had anybody on the show that has worked with either of these species. So could you teach us maybe a little bit more about them? And then how did you start to work with these very specific cats? It would be great.
Yeah, well, actually, to be honest with you, I don't have that much experience with either tigers or cloud leopards. It was more kind of another, let's say, lucky situation or coincidence that there was a good friend of mine who we worked together on cheetahs and leopards in Namibia. He was asked by a colleague to come over to Borneo to help them with trapping the cloud leopards and the leopard cats. They were a bit struggling with capture success there. So he asked me to join him, and we went there for a few weeks, just putting some traps out and testing some other capturing techniques. And I guess we also got a bit lucky capturing some of them. So but I didn't really spend much time there. It was more kind of a one-time event. And then another colleague of mine from US, Max Allen, he was involved with tiger research in Sumatra. So we did some papers from camera trapping data there. But I really don't consider myself expert on either of these species.
Just good luck.
We did work a bit more in Asia, in Mongolia, in the Altai Mountains on snow leopards.
Yes, please. Actually, go into that then, because I am. The snow leopards are next on my bucket list of animals to go see in the wild. So I could talk about them till I'm blue in the face. So yes, could you please tell us about Mongolian snow leopards?
If you go to see them, then good luck.
Yeah.
They're just so cryptic. It's crazy. You can be like 50 meters away from them, you stare into them, and you just don't see them if they don't move. So they're just, the camouflage. I mean, there are some places when it seems there's a lot of ecotourism going on around them as well.
Yeah, in India,
and there are some places, especially in India, this is also the place I heard, that it's actually not so difficult to see them if you really take a week and you just spend it, staring through the telescope, especially with some local guide. I heard several people who went there and they actually managed to see a snow leopard. Coming to our work in Altai, it was focused on camera trapping. It was, again, a lucky coincidence, let's say, because there was a friend of mine from Italy who was approached by another Italian colleague who is living in Mongolia to initiate the snow leopard project there. I think it's for it's for 6 years.
Wow.
We've been going there, different places, putting cameras. First aim was just to, find out how many there are, because with snow leopards, it's a big problem that we don't really have a good estimate about the global population, because most of the ranges, they're very remote, so it was never sampled. So all these estimates of populations are coming from extrapolations from this little study size that there was some attempts to estimate their density. So we want to increase the number of these sites so we can have these better overall numbers in the end. In some parts, it was actually quite sad because it was believed to be some of the strongholds for snow leopard in the country, let's say, including Talambok, like the highest peak in the country, and so on. And we find out basically snow leopards are almost gone there.
Wow.
But on the other hand, there are some places that still it seems to be like a good population. But it's really kind of indicated that we need more of these field surveys because you just cannot extrapolate, knowing what is in one area, and you assume that because habitat is similar, it will be similar densities, can be very, very different. So we really need more of these local estimates to come up with a good number. And it was the main thing how it started. But then, of course, when you have out a lot of camera traps for a long time, you're getting a lot of data also on the other species. So we are now also using these data, because snow leopards, they're so charismatic, it's not that difficult to get funding, to these kind of expeditions. But for some other smaller animals, it's really hard to get funding. So we can use then data that are primarily gathered targeting the snow leopard, but anything that shows up in front of camera trap gets photographed. So for example, we have now 2 studies going on in Pallas cat, this like a small phalid that also lives in these remote areas. It will be hard to get funding for them, but we're just getting a lot of data now from snow leopard surveys. So it's a very useful bycatch, let's say. Another important topic, because we're really seeing that more and more encroachment by the livestock connected primarily with the global cashmere market, just because there's such a high cashmere demand, globally, and cashmere, you only get this kind of fur in animals that are bred in high altitudes. There's really it was almost exponential increase in number of livestock in this area that used to be very remote, very low with low productivity. And you can imagine what this high density of sheep and goats does to these mountains when already the grass is very scarce. So it has strong effect. We observed towards the native ungulates, let's say Siberian ibex, which is also the main wild prey for the snow leopard. So they are avoiding the livestock, the areas where they're being encroached by these high densities of sheep and goats. And we also see actually the snow leopards is avoiding these areas. So this seems to be a major conservation issue. There is maybe not so much actually direct killing of the snow leopard, but just basically losing habitat because of this increasing density of livestock. And there are also some other interesting insights that we got. For example, some of these sites we're surveying is dominated by the Kazakh people. And some others it's mainly Mongolians. And what we're seeing that where there's mainly the Mongolian ethnicity, that we have much better population of snow leopards and also their wild prey, even though there's this livestock encroachment in both areas. But what we are kind of assuming, let's say, is it actually might have to do with religion.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Mongolians are mainly Buddhists, and Buddhists are they're much more tolerant of generally, or life of animals is much more sacred, while Kazakhs they're mainly Muslim, and with both Islam and Christianity, this attitude towards animals is it's a whole different level than, let's say, from the Buddhist or Hindu. So it's quite correlative observation, but still this is quite an indication that in areas with predominant Buddhism, usually populations of these animals are much more vital than areas with monotheistic religions.
Right. Actually, I'm quite excited you brought that up, because I'm currently working on, ironically, getting some Buddhist communities onto the show that live in big cat habitat in Nepal. So I've read papers on this. I've actually wrote just like a research paper when I was during my master's about this, because I had never made that connection coming from a dominantly Christian country, that the way we are raised in our culture can have a big influence on how we treat our wildlife around us. And so that was my first time having this, making that connection between, because if specifically I was looking at monasteries and their role in conservation actually was ironically snow leopards at that time. And it was the first time I had put 2 and 2 together that this could be a thing. And so the fact that you bring that up, but to me, it doesn't surprise me, but it's just because I had looked into the literature myself, and hopefully I'll be able to then share with everybody, essentially anyone that wants to listen, somebody that is a Buddhist that actually, and their views of the cats that they live with and the wildlife that they live with, and also their concerns for the future. So it's a very interesting topic. It's like another layer to the human wildlife dynamic that I think those of us that are just hardcore in research don't really think about until it's kind of brought to us into our face, like it was for me. And then to go to these other cultures and meet Buddhists and meet Hindus and be like, wow, yeah, you just their lives are different, and the way they look at wildlife, it's beautiful. It's incredible. Like I've said in earlier episodes when I was all over Nepal, like you don't kill a god. Like you don't do that, you know? So to see what that influence is, especially with conflict-ridden species like snow leopards and all these other cats, I think is a very interesting dynamic that at least I find really interesting. And so one that I hope is looked into further. And I mean, I know I'm going to, but again, I'm not doing like professional research on it. I'm just sitting down with people with really interesting stories. So I really do appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah, definitely. It's very exciting. I mean, it was, I think, quite below the radar for a long time. But in the last years, I mean, I saw some pretty fascinating papers that like made this connection between religion and wildlife conservation, and particularly Buddhism and snow leopards. I think there are quite several papers out there. I mean, this is really out of my expertise, but it's definitely because in the end, when it comes to conservation nowadays, it's all about people.
Right.
It's I mean, okay, you have to understand the biology, and there are some issues that are purely biological, let's say like our inbreeding problem with lynx and so on. But these are quite exceptional cases. Like vast majority, I think, really have to do with the people, and just about having to do with their attitudes, with their values, and of course, religion can be important part. Let's say in Amazonia, for example, you have these river dolphins, right?
Right,
And many of the indigenous communities, they believe they're actual reincarnation of their ancestors.
Right.
So killing dolphin, it's a total taboo. I mean, you just don't do it. You don't kill your, like I said, your god or your ancestor. So you can just imagine what this affects the conservation of species. If it's a taboo to kill a certain animal, then it's almost the best protection you can afford. So it's definitely an important topic. I mean, even in US, I heard there like some Native American reserves when the tribes, just because they feel, let's say, this connection, spiritual connection with the wolf, let's say, they refuse to hunt the wolves, even though they were kind of the management plan predicts that. I think Wisconsin, some area like that. So it's in our societies we don't think about these topics so much, at least in Europe. But it's in some other places of the world can be quite important aspect as well in the conservation.
Right. Yeah. And like I said, I hope it's a topic that I get to explore more on the show and also have the opportunity to share with everyone else from the people that is their belief. So I'll keep everyone posted there. So now that we've done this global tour, there's a reason why I wanted to do this big picture. And since you've worked all across Europe, Asia, and Africa researching and conserving carnivores, have you noticed any commonalities across the globe? And I mean, that's one thing. Are there similarities, just living with carnivores? And at the same time, what are the differences? Or is it just pretty different case by case basis? Are there, just maybe just share with us what you've seen in your time around the world.
Yeah, maybe the thing I was really fascinated is how similar things are. It's like, okay, there are always some exceptions, but typically wherever you go, you have people, you have their livestock, and you have the predator who is killing the livestock, and then you have people killing the predator. That's the main theme, let's say, that is really repeated over and over wherever you go, actually, throughout the world. And I think especially, let's say, for people like from Europe, I guess it's similar from North America, it's really important to understand this part, because at least in Europe, people who think about Africa say, oh, it's not like these huge national parks and there's like wilderness and no people. And they can conserve predators, but us in Europe, it's so many people, it's so few forests, we cannot do it. It's impossible. But then you travel around, you see it's everywhere the same. Okay, you have some areas with big parks, but majority of animals still, they live outside of protected areas. So I really believe that the only way forward, only solution is actually to learn how to coexist with them. Because this separation model that, especially North America and Africa, they're proposing this quite a lot. It's too small. The protected areas are too small, and it will never work out. So we need to learn to live together with these predators, or we're gonna lose it. I think it's as simple as that. Yeah, and so for me, especially coming back to Europe, then I always stress this point that no, I mean, what you see on Animal Planet is not real life. Real life is exactly the same as you living here with a bear around your village. So we all have, to do our part if we are to, to conserve biodiversity across the globe. We cannot leave it to, some remote third world countries to do it for us. Yeah, and then another, I think, quite important topic, because it often really comes down to livestock. And then I think another important topic when it comes down to livestock is that there are solutions, how can you have the livestock and the predator in the same landscape? It requires certain effort, certain knowledge, ingenuity, because, there's no silver bullet. One thing works somewhere,
right?
The other thing work, like what we learned from cheetahs, in Namibia, it would never work for snow leopards in Mongolia or bears in Europe. But they're usually, if you really, put effort, have a solid research, solid science behind it, you can come up with things that work, and you can have these successes because they come from all over the place, from wolves in North America, bears in Europe, cheetahs, leopards in Africa. You have these ways when there's a relatively simple solution, not too expensive, and you can reduce the damages, never for 100%, of course, but you can reduce them like 70, 80, sometimes 90%. So it's really about, understanding first ecology of these species, and then which are the technical solutions that can help you, or they don't even have to be very technical, You can just move like with cheetahs,
right,
cattle from one part of the farm to another one. But to find the solution, then you can really reduce a lot these conflicts and including livestock depredations. And, people often, many farmers that I speak with, either in Europe, in Africa or Mongolia, is I can tolerate some losses. If they take, let's say there was a farmer in Namibia who told me that, okay, if leopard takes 3 or 4 calves per year, I can live with that. I mean, yeah, it's part of nature. It's kind of a tax for nature. But I cannot live with leopards taking 20 of my calves because just economically I will not survive anymore. So it's really, I think, important to bring these damages down to some, level that people can tolerate. And then this can be a way to coexist. Not always nice. There will always be some blood, on livestock side, on the predator side, but, we have a viable population and still people living their livelihoods at the same time.
Right. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to ask this particular question, is because few of us have the opportunity to see human large carnivore conflict and coexistence on such a scale as you. And so asking that, like, we can just get such tunnel vision on just cheetahs in Namibia, and this is what they experience. But you have seen people living beside predators on multiple continents, and what are the similarities? And of course, things are going to vary by country to country, continent to continent, community to community. But just like you said, there are some commonalities. That's just the way of life of living with carnivores, and especially when they want to eat the thing that you have. So yeah, that's interesting to hear and listen to, that there are some strings that attach all of it together. Yeah, and next, I kind of wanted to shift a little bit to you personally and your work that you've done abroad. So you have been so many places, most of which you are the foreigner coming into these communities. And just mostly for people listening, like someone wants to go down that path where they're really interested in a species that might not be where they're from. How have you managed that, going into these communities and being welcomed? Like, what is the best way to respect people and the way they live, but while also answering these important questions? How have you managed to balance that through your years of work? And has that changed over the years, and how you've approached this? And yeah, just share with us what you've experienced in your years in the field.
Maybe I would highlight 2 points in this respect. One is like really come there to listen. Even if you're, like to say a carnivore expert, but if you come to a new country, the first farmer is going to meet will definitely have much more experience with this predator than you have.
Right.
So you definitely have to lose the attitude, of like being like a smart ass carnivore researcher, and tell the people, just be there and listen, and you actually get a lot of information. Not everything is correct, but still you can have a lot of ideas, that you can then later test, scientifically. And the second point is then also connected with this, it requires time. So, it really takes, because you cannot just show up there and, people will open to you and they'll be open to your research and what your ideas you want to do. It really takes time to spend in the community, go for beers with the local farmers and
Right.
really, you really have to put effort. And kind of a, let's say, easy way how to do it is to get local contacts. Let's say a local researcher who was working, 20 years in the field with these farmers. These kind of people can get you in very quickly, because if you just come there, you would need years to really get there. But if somebody brings you in who already has contacts with the local farmers who have their trust, then it's much easier also for you, like a newcomer, to get involved and really get good insights. Because like I said, okay, in some areas, including my own home country, I'm spending many years, but some places I just go a few times, in my life, and then really having a good local contact researcher there is help to really facilitates these insights you can get from the local people and also local animals. I mean, they also, if you have a field biologist who spent last 15 years, in the field with this animal, there's no other better person to tell you how, to get you all that can be known with current level of technology with these species. Yeah, I would say large part is really this networking. I have a good international network of people and putting in also a lot of effort, just these personal interactions, let's say, that you have with people in different places.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about who you know. That's one of the biggest tips that I always love to throw out there. It's like, who's your network? How strong is your network? And go with, the local voice, the local person. So that's fantastic advice. And continuing on to you, I mean, if anybody looks you up and they see all these incredible things you've done, your name's on so many papers, professor, giving all these talks, they're like, wow, he's done so many crazy things. Like, this is wonderful. But as we all know in this field, there's an unsexy side to all of this. There's a lot of challenges that all of us have to overcome. Is there a particular struggle or challenge that you would be willing to share with us that maybe you've had to overcome that was maybe a hard time during your career so far?
Yeah, maybe, having this kind of a career, especially being spread over multiple continents, it can be quite challenging to have a family at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it really depends on your partner. I guess I've been very lucky in this respect, but still, especially having a young kid, it's, you have to make a lot of compromises. So I would say this was maybe a very challenging part. And I would say for me, I guess it was quite a good decision to have child quite late.
Yeah.
Because in other ways, I think I would feel quite frustrated, because especially, when you're young in this, as a wildlife researcher, you don't get many opportunities, right? You're not getting invited, these nice places to, and people showing you around and this exciting research they're doing. You really have to fight for every opportunity you get.
Right.
But then with your career, you're getting more and more contacts and you're getting more and more invitations like this. And so, it can be, I imagine, quite frustrating that you finally reach kind of a point that you start getting access to these exciting projects and study areas, and you cannot do it anymore because you want to spend time with your family, right?
Right.
So I think this, at least for me, maybe personally, was like a major thing that I'm seeing now that has to be taken into account. But for me, it's also like experienced so many things before. It's much easier now to say no to things. Even if it's a great opportunity to learn something or go somewhere or get involved in something, just because you experienced a lot of things before. But it would be early in career, then I think at least a type of person as myself would really struggle with it. Or on the other side, the family would suffer.
Right. And that's been brought up on more than one episode, is the personal side of this. I know so many people, I mean, me included, who has held off at starting a family, and some people might not have them at all, maybe me included, just because the way this life is. And so that is something that anyone listening has to really consider before you start this field or any field similar to this. Is, are you okay holding off on starting a family? What sacrifices are you willing to make now or later to make your, whatever dreams or passions you have come true? So I can definitely understand and see why that would be quite a big challenge to, I guess I could maybe overcome isn't the correct term, because you don't overcome being a father, but you know what I mean.
Right.
Finding balance between career and family. It's a big one. And it's one that I think going in, a lot of us don't give enough thought to, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And it really depends, like I said, on your partner a lot,
Yeah.
like the things and what is possible, and, how much, just people complicating about it, because some partners are very open. You just move for a few months to Namibia. I know it's not such a big deal, and, some will just never, commit to that. So it's, a big issue also, that it's hard to plan in advance, let's say, how things will go. So sometimes you just get lucky or you don't.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So thanks for sharing that. Yeah, that's again, it's also nice to hear the father side, because I've had some mothers on that have shared the similar sentiment. So I love hearing all voices and all experiences. But yeah, so do you have any upcoming projects that you can share with us? Anything that you can say here, or is it all tip top secret, or are you just keeping on, or what's next for you?
Well, maybe there's another downside of this career, I would say,
Oh, yeah.
because, we all depend on projects.
Mm-hmm.
At least in my case, okay, if you're like a stable, if you're like professors in university, okay, have a stable position. But if you are like a full-time researcher like myself, and then just do a little bit of teaching, then basically means you have a project, you have a job, you run out of projects, you lose your job. And
so it's like contract work almost.
Right, because at least in our case, the university doesn't give you contract beyond the project, because there's no, funding. And at the moment, actually, we are also struggling a bit, because we have these two big projects coming to the end next year. So one is this big one on Lynx, another one on leopards in Namibia. So actually, we are now in a phase that we are applying for grants, and that's not the nicest part of this job, but we have to do it. I mean, in a way, I would say it can be also satisfying, because it's maybe the part that you can be most creative, because you can actually come up with with the research problem, with ideas how to solve it. It has to be very innovative, genuine, to get people excited to fund it, or have to come up with good idea to address some management challenge. So it can be also very creative part, but still just being stuck behind computer and fight with these bureaucratic issues that are part of every project application, that people can struggle. But so at the moment, actually, we are in this phase, so we don't have any clear project coming up yet. So we are applying for grants. So not much to share here at the moment, I'm afraid.
I guess, that's totally true. Just because people that follow the normal research path, they're like, I need to get in, I gotta get a postdoc, blah, 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 be a researcher at a university and going on. But just like you said that more of an independent body that does this. I'm kind of curious myself. How do you then find new projects? Do you just start emailing your contacts and like, hey, what are you up to nowadays? Can I help? Do you need help? I guess what is the next step other than applying to grants to maybe continue the work you're already doing? But like, is that how you find new projects, or how do you do that?
Continuing, like, people the funding, institutions are usually not interested just, that you keep going with the same thing you've been working before. Usually they're looking for something new things, some novel things. There are always exceptions, right? But usually the research grants we're applying for, it has to be something exciting, something new, or that hasn't been done yet. A lot of, groundbreaking potential and things like that. So sometimes you get invited, someone gets a big project and they want you in, like I got lucky now listened with this alliance with the German institute. But usually it's more like you're somewhere out there in the field and you get this really cool idea what would be really nice to study, and you see how important it could be, and then you just keep your eyes open for open calls for research grants, and you start applying. But it's usually, I would say, an average 10 to 20% success rate.
Ooh,
so you have to write like 5 to 10 proposals that you get one grant. So but
brutal.
and it depends also on the content, I guess, because let's say in Europe it's a lot about the national funding, like government funding. We really don't have much like private funding, or let's say funds. I forgot how it's called in US. Like for each gun or ammunition that is being sold, part of it will go into wildlife research. Let's say, so there are these kind of funds. That are come from like private money in a way. So we don't have that much here. It's more national government or European level. EU also funds quite a lot of science as well. So these are these kind of projects we can go for. And then the other part is the conservation projects. They're not interested so much in science. Sometimes actually you shouldn't do it because then you won't get a grant, but you can demonstrate that, something you want to do can have very clear, concrete, conservative, results that you do. And that's another type of grant you can apply for, at least in our field. For example, my experience, that's actually easier to get this kind of funding.
Oh, yeah?
Let's say, at least in Europe, we have this big financial mechanism by the European Union. It's called LIFE, and they fund a lot of these big multi-million projects. Let's say our recent Lynx project was like that. We had the bear and wolf project before, and usually success rate in this is much higher than for pure scientific or basic research projects.
That makes sense. And so most of those, at least from my experience, please correct me if I'm wrong or if it's different in Europe, a lot of those are funded through universities. So like people that are actually currently in school or associated with the university in some way, that at least that seems that what most of my network here, that's how they get funding is like, through the university, and they don't get paid much, but at least their work is funded. But those are like strict research projects. So yeah, I can see how maybe getting money for those might be harder.
Yeah, you do get funds through the university, but you have to bring your own money into the university. It's not like, university would have a foundation to finance you. So you apply, let's say, through your university for a call research grant that's been, put out by the, let's say, European Commission or a national research agency, something like that. So it's quite rare that, university would have some kind of money available directly for research. Usually you just apply for university to some external funders.
Well, so I guess your next stuff is up in the air. And like I said, maybe in a year we'll have to sit back down, or once I finally get over to Europe and see all of you in person, we can have an update episode because, wow, you have so many things. We need to keep up to date, what's going on with the Lynx, and maybe talk with you and Adrian about that. And then the golden jackals, and we need to know what's going on with leopards and snow leopards. And wow, you have so many interesting things. And the lions that just started, like there's just, gosh, I feel like we just scratched the surface of what you've actually worked on and what's to come, which is really, really exciting. And if anybody listening, if maybe they want to check in on what your work or maybe read more about what you've published or maybe even contact you, what are some of the best ways for people to do that?
Well, for publications, which is usually, a bit boring reading, let's say, in scientific papers. There's like a ResearchGate is one of these, sites when you can get a lot of this information. Otherwise, like for most of the projects we run, we have like a special web pages that people can, just Google. And yeah, we also have our own like personal web pages, our university faculty page. We are not that active on social media, I would say. Some of my colleagues are a bit more, but I don't even have Facebook. So so my email is also available online, so you can always Google it and drop email, and we can, say specifically, let's say someone's interested in snow leopards, I can then direct them to the webpage about snow leopards project and so on. But yeah, it really depends again on the project. Let's say at the moment we have this big Lynx project, so it's a lot of happening also on social media about the Lynx. It's a very active, project webpage. But in 2 years, when this project will be finished, it will, there won't be much new things going up there. So it's kind of everything's a bit temporary here.
Right. And of course, and you and I can discuss, and I can put any links in the show notes so that people can follow you. I already have your ResearchGate. Again, that's how I found your golden jackal paper. That really like, whoa, I was like, I need to ask about that. That was not one of my questions originally. I'm like, I'm asking about this. So yeah, your ResearchGate is very, very full. And of course, that link will be in the show notes, and I'll include any other ones that you and I discussed. But Miha, you're
sure,
so
yeah, I can send you, I have like a personal webpage when you put our project links there. So
that's perfect. That's perfect. That's exactly what I need, or anyone needs.
And the only kind of social media I guess I'm active is Twitter. So like most papers we publish, we put a link on Twitter. So there's also a Twitter account. It's one option, too.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
If some people will be interested, yeah.
Yeah, I'll make sure I get all of those links for you so that people can just go to one spot and just look at the show notes for this episode and make sure that they follow you and all of your interesting carnivore work. But Oh, thanks so much, Miha. You are incredible. And again, like I said, this is just episode 1 of many, because I just, out of my own curiosity, and I'm sure the rewildology community as well, we want to keep up to date on this really interesting research that you're doing. So again, thank you for spending your evening with me.
Yeah, thank you very much for interest and helping to share some of the messages, some insights from the carnivore world, not just from our team, but also all the other great podcasts you've done. So I also appreciate that.
Awesome. Thanks, Miha. Do you also feel like you just took an entire wildlife ecology course in a little more than an hour? I felt that way recording our conversation and listening to it again while putting this episode together. If you have a question for Miha, drop a comment on this episode's post on the Rewildologist Facebook page. As always, I want to thank you for being a part of the rewildology community. If you'd like to support the show, some zero-cost ways include subscribing to the podcast on your favorite streaming app, leaving a rating and review to boost the algorithm, which will present the podcast to more listeners, signing up for the weekly Rewildology newsletter at rewildology.com, subscribing to the YouTube channel, and following the show on your favorite social media app. If you'd like to financially support the show and help us keep these stories on the airwaves, consider making a monetary donation at rewildology.com or purchase a piece of swag to show off your rewildology love. At least 10% of proceeds from this podcast will be donated to our conservation partners. I'd also like to extend a special thanks to Heather Valley, the show's audio and video producer. If you are a fellow podcaster and would like to hire Heather to help with your show, she'd be more than happy to talk to you. Please reach out through one of our social channels or email us to be connected with Heather. I'd also like to thank Focusrite for powering the podcast sound. If you'd like to see the Focusrite gear we use to record the show, head on over to rewildology.com and check out Nature Podcasting under the Resources tab. Until next time, friends, together we'll rewild the planet. Hey, thanks again for listening to this episode of Rewildology. If you like what you heard, hit that subscribe button to never miss a future episode. Do you have a cool environmental organization, travel story, or research that you'd like to share? Let me know at rewildology.com. Until next time, friends, together we will rewild the planet.